what's going on in that courtroom, namely the American flags in the courtroom. Now, one of the things you said when we just had a brief moment to speak earlier was that's something that could be prejudicial. As a defense lawyer on appeal, something might be argued that there were 3 flags in front of the witness stand, and of course the large flags that are normally there in a courtroom, as well as pictures of the victim. Now, explain to me why the presence of flags or extra flags in the courtroom would be prejudicial. What's the problem?
Okay, I don't have a problem with flags being in the courtroom, and I don't have a problem with anything else being in the courtroom as long as it's fair. Now, what I'm saying is, if there's an appeal in this case and they take the court TV tape and they just show the justices, whoever's going to see the appeal, what it looks like inside that courtroom, and you say, all we wanted was for the client to get a fair trial. Now, the evidence in this case is overwhelming, okay? So I think this is a little over the top, and I just don't think it's a smart move. But when the jury is looking at the witness and the jury is looking at the judge, what do they see? Well, they see the big flag of Texas in the back. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And they see these 3 American flags, right in front of the witnesses. Now, you have FBI witnesses, you have federal employees testifying, you have police witnesses, and so I think that kind of bolsters their testimony.
How so? I mean, is it because you think the American flag is a symbol of the U.S. government as opposed to an individual defendant?
I think so. That's one thing, and some people may say, well, it also represents the Constitution and all that.
Or the people of the United States.
That's true.
Or something even since September 11th, I think, has different meaning for people. Frankly, I consider myself a liberal. After September 11th, I called for people on this show to start putting the American flag in front of their homes. We have one in front of our home, and I think it does have a different meaning since September 11th.
So President Bush got that request from you? And
well,
that's what he asked everyone else?
I called for it on the show on September 11th. I'm not saying he got it from me. Of course, a lot of people thought of it, okay? It wasn't the only person that thought of it. I'm not claiming that.
No.
But I think the people all thought of it together for a reason, because it wanted to be a show of support, I think, for our troops.
For the government. For the government.
For the people.
It's a show of support for the government. That's fine. I have a 6-foot by 9-foot flag draped over the front of my house, okay? Now, what I'm saying is it's a show of support for the government. It's a symbol of the government, and that's fine.
I don't know if that's necessarily what everybody thinks on that subject.
Okay, well,
But go ahead.
People may disagree. Now, what I'm saying is when you look at a picture of what it's like in that courtroom, especially now during this part of the trial where they're bringing in guns and they have a stockpile and they have these, fancy stands for the guns. You have a stand for the guns up, to the left side of the jury, to the left side of the witness box. You have a stand for the rifles in front of them. You have 3 American flags. You have the big Texas flag. You have the pictures of the officer who was killed,
yes,
and you have a picture of his family, and you're saying these witnesses are supposed to be, up there on their own, and this is supposed to be a fair trial. I think that's ridiculous.
Well, I think overall, you make a compelling case. Overall, for the entire courtroom scene, let me go to Beth Karras, who I understand is standing by out there in Texas. Beth, let me ask you, has the defense made any objections about the sort of the visual makeup of the courtroom, the flags, the picture of the victim?
I have not heard them make an objection about that, but I have asked questions just generally about how those pictures, the picture of Aubrey Hawkins alone and then with his son, is permitted to just stay up there in front of the jury, reminding the jury that this is what this case is all about, because some judges and some jurisdictions would not permit that, and lawyers would object. And what I've been told is that that the defense is lucky there are only 2 pictures up there, because in Dallas County, that courtroom could be lined with pictures.
Wow. Well, that is very interesting. Beth, I understand that there's a hearing that's just been going on in the courtroom. What can you tell us about that?
The reason they broke the testimony of Special Agent Mahoney when they did was because the defense was about to object, or wanted to object out of the presence of the jury, to some exhibits that were coming up. 2 pieces of paper, which are identical, which were recovered from 2 different places, one from a black bag inside the RV motorhome and one from a trash can just outside. Now, the document, the judge hasn't ruled yet on whether or not it's admissible. The objection was prejudicial, inflammatory, really not relevant, and the document's entitled The 10 Commandments of Spec War, and it's by Richard Marcinko, the one who wrote Rogue Warrior, the former Navy SEAL, who's written a couple of books. And I didn't have a chance to look at it in detail, but it lists, among other things, like kill your enemy before your enemy kills you. And the prosecution says, look, this is a group of 7 guys who are out on a crime spree, who busted out of prison, and this is basically, the rules they were living by. The defense is trying to keep it out. In Rivas's trial, it did come in. So
well,
we
it
don't know
certainly
really
rebuts the defense theory that they were the gentle criminals or the compassionate criminals, that they wanted to take some money, but they never intended to hurt anyone. If they have a document that really is sort of a how-to manual of how to commit violence, certainly that has to come in because it would be relevant to rebut what the defense is saying.
Well, then, and the prosecution feels that any evidence, and they're probably correct, any evidence collected at the scene that is at all relevant to the way they were conducting their lives should be permitted before this jury.
Now, Beth, we've had a lot of witnesses yesterday and today talking about the physical evidence in this case, talking about the guns, talking about the ballistics, the DNA. Can you summarize for us what the physical evidence has shown thus far?
Well, a lot of guns were stolen by these 7 men. The jury has seen many of the guns, not all of them. 16 guns were stolen from the prison when they escaped. 44 guns were stolen from Oshman's sporting goods store, and another gun stolen from Aubrey Hawkins. So a number of them have been in the courtroom, but there's been a mountain of physical evidence as well as photographs of the crime scene and the arrest scene that have been introduced to the jury. Evidence of that Aubrey Hawkins not only was shot 11 times, but that his body was dragged. I mean, he was pulled out of his car, his body was dragged 6 feet, run over, and then dragged another 10 feet by the car. And so parts of his uniform evidencing the dragging, for example, were introduced. His bulletproof vest showing impressions on it. They heard from the medical examiner, autopsy photos, a lot of crime scene photos, and as I say, a lot of guns. Now, we're just learning about which guns are which, and we haven't seen yet Aubrey Hawkins' gun, but we have seen guns that were stolen from Oshman's that day.
But we don't, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't thus far have any connection to the defendant Newberry. We don't have a gun in his hand. We don't have a bullet coming out of that gun and killing Aubrey Hawkins or even hitting Aubrey Hawkins, other than the confession, which hasn't come in yet, but which is going to come in, right?
Right. Now, the arrest of Newberry hasn't come in yet, and that will be tomorrow, because he was arrested about a day and a half after the first 5. Well, one of those 5 committed suicide, and Newberry and Murphy, the last 2 to be arrested, were arrested on January 24th. So any weapons in his possession at that time, I imagine we'll hear about, and whether or not Hawkins' gun was recovered, we'll also hear about. Now, I just received word that the document I was telling you about, the 10 Commandments of Spec War, have been ruled irrelevant, at least as to the one found in the trash can, although the judge did say if it comes in as to one, it comes in as to the other. It's the same document, and that the prosecution is upset. I just received word, but I haven't spoken to anyone about it.
Wow, all right. And Beth, I'm wondering how the Hawkins family is holding up. This is their 2nd trial. Presumably, they're going to have to deal with 7 trials related to Aubrey Hawkins' death. How are they holding up?
Well, I'll tell you, they were here only on the first day of the trial, showing their support. His mother was here, his widow, testified. She was the very first witness in the case. And, you know, I watched his mother periodically throughout the day, and she seemed to be holding up well, as strong as can be. But I have not seen them back on days 2 and 3 of the trial.
Beth, hi, it's Bob ALTCHILER in the studio.
Hello.
My question for you is, do you know if they're going to be able to match a gun that was recovered from Newberry with any of the spent shells at the scene of the murder?
I don't believe they're going to be able to, well, I should say match any 2 bullets that killed Officer Hawkins. Spent shells at the scene, possibly. I'm not sure about that. No, Newberry does admit that he fired his gun 3 times and that he had a gun out there. So that's pretty damaging evidence. But most of the bullets that were recovered or fragments that were in Officer Hawkins' body or near him were not identifiable. So probably he will not be matched up to anything killing Officer Hawkins.
All right. Well, Beth, how has the jury been responding during this case? Of course, we can't see them. It's a riveting trial, I think. Have they been watching attentively, or have they been dozing off? What have they been doing?
For the most part, they have been very attentive. I mean, it's been moving very quickly. Almost 30 witnesses have testified in 3 days, and there's just so much evidence, and you really need to be attentive. The judge is permitting them to take notes, although I do not see many of them taking notes. There are 7 men and 5 women, and then 2 female alternates. 2 alternates seem to be taking more notes than anyone else. But but they are paying very close attention, and I see them periodically looking over, at least what appears to be looking in the direction of Donald Newberry. And he pays really close attention, occasionally leaning over to talk to his attorneys, but every time his attorney, Mr. Parks, gets up to make an objection, Newberry is trained, his eyes are trained right on him. He is focused right on his attorney. He's had problems with attorneys in the past.
What problems has he had in the past with attorneys?
Well, he claims that he had to threaten to hurt an attorney in the past to get him to come and visit him because he wasn't getting the attention he felt he deserved when he was sitting in jail.
Well, Donald Newberry's had a lot of complaints about the prison system, the criminal justice system. Now he's on trial in Texas. The defense attorney, Bob ALTCHILER, sitting here with me, has got some problems with the way this trial is being conducted. I think Donald Newberry's probably never going to be satisfied with the way that he's treated by the criminal justice system. But he's been sitting there, Beth, hasn't he, pretty respectfully. We haven't had any outbursts from him. He hasn't been misbehaving in the courtroom, has he?
No, he has not. Indeed, he has been very respectful. Occasionally, he turns around and looks into the spectator gallery and smiles at certain people. I was able to grab one of those people yesterday. She's back again this afternoon, and that's his niece, a woman who is 13 years younger than he is, who tells me that she has very fond memories of her uncle. His niece, his sister bore this child, but his mother raised her. His mother is no longer alive, and she is coming when she can to show her support for her uncle.
Well, it's got to be very tough for the Newberry family as well. Bob, have you had a case where it seems like everything is against the defense? The evidence is just overwhelming. We even have a confession, and yet the defense pulls out a not guilty verdict?
Well, it's very rare, you know, that happens, but sometimes it actually does happen. I have had cases like that.
Well, I know that you have.
No, what I'm saying is,
what does it take?
not because
what does it
of,
take for it to turn around?
Well, sometimes things that seem obviously against you at first aren't really so. And then sometimes you go into a case and you know, the witness, the case, the way that the government lays it out, it seems like you have no shot whatsoever. But maybe you have a few things. Maybe that, you know, because a lot of times the government presents things, and a lot of times the government takes the word of FBI agents and police officers, you know, on its face. They don't really challenge it. And you're the first one out there challenging it. And sometimes you have the opportunity to turn the testimony on its ear. It's very hard, though, because really what you want to do is when you're first starting to get ready to try a case, you know, even a case like this, is you want to find a reason that you can, you know, go to the jury and say, my guy deserves your attention, and maybe some type of sympathy.
What's Newberry's best shot here? If he can pull this thing out at the bottom of the ninth inning, what's his best chance?
Is that on the death penalty or a guilty verdict?
Either one, whatever you got.
Well, this is a very difficult case, okay? And I think that, you know, at first glance, knowing what I know about the case, you know, it may just come down to what happened at the prison the first time. And I'm just talking about the death penalty phase. I think he has a very difficult time. You know, he escaped, he's guilty. On the murder itself, it's very hard. He was there, 5 guns were shot, you know, one of those guns at least was used, you know, to kill this person. It's just a very difficult thing. Now, the defense team knows things that I don't know, and maybe they have some, you know, little things that they're going to try to pull a rabbit out of a hat with, but I think that maybe what they're going to go for is the death penalty phase, if he doesn't want to die.
If he doesn't want to die. And one of the things I've learned here at Court TV is it ain't over till it's over. Some of these prosecution cases have looked very good, and the defense has pulled it out. Beth, this case has been moving quickly. What do we have to look forward to?
Well, I am told that tomorrow will probably be a full day of testimony because the officers, the law enforcement members who were involved in the arrest of Newberry and Murphy will be testifying. We haven't heard anything about the arrest of the final 2, and those witnesses will include the case agent, the lead investigator who took the confession from Newberry. So that'll take a lot of time tomorrow, and there may be a charge conference tomorrow evening if the defense doesn't put on a case, and they may not. They may be saving whatever they have for a penalty phase because, believe me, they understand exactly what you've been talking about, and then the penalty phase would start sometime next week.
Well, that's going to be very interesting.
If we get to that.
If we get to that. No, that's absolutely right. If we get to that. Well, Beth, we're glad you're out of the wind today. We're going to let you get back into the courtroom. Thank you for that report. And while the court is still on a break, we're going to take our break. We'll be right back.
Legal flashback, January 16th, 1919. Prohibition begins when the 18th Amendment is ratified. And in 1997, Ennis Cosby, son of actor Bill